Hello, this is Simple Life Philosophy, and I'm your host, Ed Raby. This is the channel where, as I journey through my life, I am looking for a philosophy of life that is both simple to understand and simple to execute, and I'm just taking you along on that journey with me. Today I want to talk about a philosophical concept that comes up a lot, and in my current reading of Stoicism, some of my reading of Pagan philosophy, and other things, and my own past as a Christian in theology, the idea of fate or destiny or predestination comes up a lot. And I want to explain that I think I'm kind of in flux about it anymore. Now, when I was a Christian, I became very strongly opposed to Calvinism because if there was a deity, the problem I had with Calvinism is like, okay, so God picks who's going to heaven and who's going to hell, but he's just in doing so. That didn't seem like really giving anybody a chance. And I actually came to the conclusion that Calvinism is probably one of the most diabolical doctrines ever invented. And, Calvin was just not one of those fun guys, and he created a theology that wasn't very fun either, and led to a lot of very interesting evil in the world, if you ask me. A lot of religious wars came after him, the Calvinists versus pretty much everybody else. When you look at the Calvinist pilgrims that landed here, they believed that they were preordained to be the great people, and these unwashed heathens, look at how many of them died at the judgment of God and all this other stuff. And the more I looked at it, the more you could take Calvinism and do some really evil crap with it and justify, well, it's just I'm just predestined to do this. And I think people who use fate in that way are probably incorrect. I think the real problem, I think, now is because I've discarded deity and I've discarded, pretty much any kind of predestination view that involves fate in the sense of there is a predetermined end. Okay, and even if there is, the one thing we have to inject into this equation is what I would call ignorance. Because even if, as I'm going to propose here in a second, the universe, when it started, when the cosmic egg starts to expand, you could theorize if that we understood all the laws of physics, or even in those early stages where the laws of physics don't seem to apply, and we were able to kind of get an idea about it, you could say that if we completely understood how every molecule was going to react, how every energy thing was going to, the whole bit, then we could literally sit there and say we could predict how everything's going to pan out and what's going to happen. And then you and I are just basically playing out a reaction, a chemical reaction that took place billions of years ago that started. And even if that's so, even if that's true, which I don't think that we completely can say that we understand everything. And I also think that there might be some sort of, quark or whatever, that they discover these days that might be truly random. Okay, like adds a element of genuine randomness to the whole equation, in which case then things aren't as predictable as we think they are. We can predict a lot of things, but every once in a while something happens and it's not predicted and say, well, we just don't know enough. And it's either through ignorance or, maybe there's some random factor that I don't quite accept that notion, because I think even if it's true, we still have to, in our own ignorance, realize that we have to make decisions. And so for me, fate or predestination has taken on a different term. And I think I think the reason like the Stoics and the pagan philosophers of, say, the current movement of, say, Asatru, or, just that pagan, mentality, the worship of the old gods and things like that, they talk about fate too. But when you talk about the Stoics talk about fate as well. And both of them have very similar definitions. I don't think that's completely weird, because the Stoics were also pagans in many respects. They believed in the gods, okay, plural, okay, And so a lot of them did, not all of them. And you don't have to believe in the gods or disbelieve them to be a Stoic. It's one of the great unifying factors of it is Stoic philosophy can kind of shake hands with a lot of different people. So, but the idea of fate is the same. Fate is not a predetermined end in these systems. Fate is simply that which one cannot control. They give it a name, fate. And the reason I'm doing this video is kind of so if you hear me use the term fate, you know that I'm talking about that which cannot be controlled. You know, I think the ancients had great understanding once they began to develop weaving. They began to understand time a little bit better. And if we envision ourselves as a thread in a tapestry, and we have some control about how our thread interacts with the other threads, there's certain things we can't do. Number one, we can't go backwards to undo decisions that we've done already. So whatever is behind us is etched, okay? We can't control the other threads that are next to us because we might think, oh, we're interacting this way, and then they decide to avoid us, you know, and it becomes very complex. And I think that is a very good analogy because what you begin to realize the longer you live and the more you study the world around you and say, okay, what can I control and what I cannot, the list of things that you can control gets really shorter and shorter. And the list of things that you begin to realize that are out of your control gets longer and longer. Okay, the longer I live, the more I realize I don't have a control over a lot of things. I can control my own attitudes, my own choices, my own business, but the world around me and the people around me are going to react in different ways. I can't control that. Now, sure, from my point of view, what I can control is significant to me, okay? And because of that, it seems to take on a larger than life. But if you look at it from a pure universe point of view, we ain't shit, okay? And each one individually, you know, we think we're something super duper special, and really all we are is a thread in a tapestry of billions of threads. And yeah, sure, we can make our mark, but sooner or later the thread runs out, and you know, other people take over. You know, it's our finiteness that we don't want to accept. I mean, when people, you know, people who know I'm an atheist say, well, why do you think people are religious? And I say, because they fear death. I think Christopher Hitchens was absolutely correct. That the reason why religions persist is we fear death. And we regret decisions we made about the dead, people that have gone on before. We create this fantasy in our mind that we're going to see all them again. We, you know, say, oh man, I really regret doing this. But you know what? When I get to heaven, we can talk it out and fix it. And so we create this mythology in our head that gives us comfort. It's a wonderful, glorious lie. And it's very well motivated, I suppose. But at the same time, it's fiction. And it doesn't help. Okay, I held on, you know, because if I believed my fate was to go to heaven and see my father again, as long as I continued to believe that, I made a lot of decisions that were based on a falsehood. And this is the thing about dealing with fate. Okay, because there's a lot of things outside of my control. But one of the things that allows me to control that better is accepting what is true and what is real. And one of the things, you know, my thread is going to come to an end someday. It may still have some effect on the people that it wove with, like my kids, even my ex-wife. You know, a lot of people that might still be around will still be affected by what I did, okay, in life. But as time goes on, that effect begins to diminish and diminish and diminish. You know, by the time we get, you know, 4 generations out away from me, nobody's going to remember who I was as a person. You know, they won't have that more close, intimate knowledge, and it'll just pass away. And fate kind of reminds me of that constantly, that there's so much out of my control and so much that is lost, so much that people just don't remember. And to me, I like the more stoic pagan view of fate, because it's very similar. And we forget the Stoics were pagans in a lot of respects. And pagan philosophy has the same idea. It's like your thread will start and end. Okay? There is an appointed time for your death, in the sense that you will die. In the sense it is determined that you will at some point in the future die. How you live up to that moment is what's important. Okay, now, even the Vikings had this notion of Valhalla, dying in battle, but they had like hundreds, I believe. I don't know, somebody who's more of an expert on it. I've studied Viking views of the future, and most of it comes down to Valhalla, or Freya's, hall, or a bunch of, or hell, where you basically serve, the daughter of Loki, and things like that. But my point is that until the moment of your death, you have a lot of determination over your own life. But there's also a bunch of things that are going to influence that life and make you change directions from time to time. And maybe there's some things that you intend to do, and then you run into fate. And the choice that you had 5 years ago where you could have done that is now taken away because it's gone. The opportunity has been passed. And so your fate has become different because of certain opportunities you didn't take and opportunities you did. So it's a different way of looking at the future, and it's not predetermined like Calvinism. It's not, this is what's going to happen to you. Every action event of your life is predetermined. It's more of a realistic view of saying, there's a lot of things you can control. There's way more that you can't. Weave your thread the best you can. Interact with the people around you. Do what you need to do. But understand that you're just a small part of a big universe. And that should lead to a lot of humility. I think if fate leads us to anything, a proper understanding of it, it should humble us. And in that sense, I think we should accept our fate, that we should humble ourselves before the understanding that there's a lot of things out of our control. And we have to work on what we can control, which is much smaller, minimalistic, essential number. Now you can see how the minimalism and essentialism joins with my Stoicism. That's a short number, that's a smaller number. Let's focus on those things, because that's what's going to truly benefit our lives and the lives of those around us. Well, I want to thank you for stopping by. I hope this has been thought-provoking. If you have any ideas or thoughts about fate yourself, be sure to leave them in the comments. I'd be interested in hearing different views of what people think, how fate works. I have my own view, of course, and it's always, with better arguments, I'll always listen and maybe change it, but we'll see. But thanks for stopping by. This has been Simple Life Philosophy. I've been your host, Ed Raby. I want to thank you for being a part of this discussion on should we accept our fate. In my opinion, I think we kind of have to. So, once again, like, share, subscribe, do the things that you need to do. Appreciate every single one of you, and I hope you have a great day.